All right, Georgia is a pretty significant favorite over the Gators. 16 points right now. It opened at about 17. We're just going to kind of monitor it as the day goes on. But yeah, I mean, that's a lot. And it's not surprising that Georgia is this significant of a favorite. They've been that here lately against the Gators last year. They were a 23-point favorite to win the game. In 21, they were only a 21-point favorite to win. Excuse me, a 14-point favorite to win the game. But I think this number is about in the universe where it should be. I mean, this is not. Don't confuse Florida winning at South Carolina as a indication that they're really a giant threat to Georgia. Georgia is going to have to lose this game as much as Florida win it. But it's dancing. The line's dancing anywhere from 15 and a half to 17. So I think I personally think Georgia's going to play well when they go down there to Jacksonville. We'll see. Florida's going to have to play their best game of the season to beat Georgia. I'm not sure I see that happening. I did want to, I do this all the time. We're going to look at games where Georgia's been at least a 16-point favorite. We're just going to call it 16 for now. But you could go back as far as 14 points. And Georgia since 2011 has been let's just call it 14 points. Georgia since 2011 has been a 14-point favorite 81 times. They are 80-2 in those games straight up. So if you're worried about if Georgia will win the game or not, in those two games, actually the two losses have come under Kirby. If you're wondering, that first one was against Vanderbilt in 2016. The other one, which I reference all the time, I mean, I don't really mean to reference it. It's just South Carolina was such a significant dog at 19 and won that game, or it might have been higher than 19, and lost that game 22-point South Carolina in 2019. That's where I'm getting the 19 from. But Georgia has really, really won these games at a very high clip. So probably statistically speaking, a very hard reality for the Gators. But why is this line the way that it is? Well, I mean, part of it is that slightly maybe a point or two depressed from the Georgia perspective because Brock Bowers is not going to play in this game. We're going to see what happens with Brock as time goes on, but there's no question that there's some anticipation that losing your best player for a period of time is going to affect you. I don't know. No one does when Brock Bowers will be back. But when you lose a tight end, it's one thing. You lose a quarterback, that's a very different ball game. So quarterbacks can be significant line movers, but that's not where this thing is at. I mean, I'm just listening. I'm going to take Georgia against the line. I think they are ready to make a statement. They've done that already this season with the just absolute throttling of Kentucky. We know how Georgia has played in this game under Kirby Smart. They have been very good. They have been very good against the Gators over the Kirby amount of time. I mean, in 2017, now that was not a very long line itself. Georgia just completely worked Florida to death that day. It was almost a shutout, but they didn't. They wound up not winning that game. Not shutting the Gators out. It would have been the first shutout since the '80s, or that Florida had played. And then in 18 they wound up covering, if I'm not mistaken. They've definitely played pretty well against Florida in this line. So in 17, Georgia covered the line. In 18, Georgia covered it. In 19, Georgia covered it. They lost because they were the favorite. In 20, they did not. I mean, straight up lost the game. In 21, they covered it. They did not cover last year's game by a point. So under Kirby Smart, they have been a very good team in terms of what expectations are that are put on them by the outside world. this game has hit the over a lot lately. Georgia's been favored in this game since 2017. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. They were 13, 7, 6, 3-point, 14, 23, and now this year 16 or 17 or 15 and a half points. I mean, that is a lot. That is a lot. Now, there is another notable game in this one. There are two really massive upsets in this series in, our lifetime. One came in 2014 when Jeremy Pruitt's defense allowed 38 points against a team that threw it 3 times. I mean, that's embarrassing. And then, in 1997 when Georgia ran all through the Gators and Florida turned it over, I think it was 4 times. Now, that was a very curious game in 97 because Kirby Smart had 2 interceptions that day. He almost had a third, if I'm not mistaken. Or he had one and he decided not to catch the other one. He nearly caught it on a 4th down and just thought, I think, either what I wonder if he remembers, I'm sure he does, whether he meant to drop the 1 interception. Did he do that on purpose, or did he got it? The ball got on him real quick. But he had a very good game against Florida in 97. Mike Bobo did. Obviously, Robert Edwards, Corey Allen, Hines Ward had a great game against the Gators. That was a good Georgia team taking out a Florida team that, couldn't figure out what they were doing at quarterback, was turning the ball over like crazy. And Georgia was ready to play that game. But Robert Edwards was the reason, and then the Orlando Scary touchdown at the end was something else. But that was a shocking result. 2014 was pretty shocking as well. All the other, so-called upsets through the years, I don't like in 2012, Georgia upset Florida. Florida was a 6.5 point favorite, the number 2 team in the country. That was one of Mark Richt's best wins. I'm not sure that was a, massive upset, but we have seen Georgia stranglehold this thing lately. I mean, since Kirby's first year, they have won all but once, and that was the 2020 game, which was a train wreck for Georgia, and they still scored 28 points, but they allowed 44. That was Kyle Trask, Kyle Pitts. That was a very good Florida offense that was, headed right towards the SEC championship showdown with Alabama before they lost LSU. Just randomly in that COVID year. So this game is a special game for a lot of different reasons for a lot of people. It's a big deal for Georgia every time they play in it. I'm certain it is for the Gators as well. They both have other really passionate rivalries. Florida State for the Gators, LSU as well as Tennessee for them. But this is the biggest game for both schools, and there's just no doubt about it. The other rivalries are intense. This is the most important game Georgia plays every year. And, it is a moment in time that defines your season. So whether Georgia can really take a stranglehold of the East is going to come down to these next 2 weeks. Florida, if you don't beat Florida, you're not going to have control of anything. So if you don't beat Florida, the Missouri game, you're playing catch up there. So I fully expect Georgia to go down there to play well. Florida, we'll talk about the Gators a lot more as time goes on here this week, but, they have been so superbly up and down this year. The beginning of the season, the loss to Utah, the playing against Charlotte, and then rebounding in between those games to really beat up Tennessee. And then the Charlotte game. Let me get this in front of me because sometimes I forget the way in which teams play, the calendar. Florida was coming into 2023. The loss to Utah was their 4th loss in a row. They lost to Vanderbilt and then Florida State and then Oregon State in 22, and then they came into 23 with a really tough test at Utah. I mean, I didn't think they'd win this game. I don't think they're going to win this game either. I didn't think they're going to win again at Utah, and they just were a mess. They throttled McNeese State, and then the really unexpected game of the season so far, there have been sort of 2. The way they lost to Kentucky and that they lost to Tennessee, and that they beat Tennessee. Now I thought they'd lose to Tennessee, and they did not. That was a really big win for Billy Napier. And then to follow it up a week later with just a really bad performance against Charlotte, and then just about as bad as it could get against Kentucky. They played fine against Vanderbilt, 38-14, and then they stole that game in Columbia. I mean, that was a great win for Florida. So they've come in with some momentum. Georgia's last two games have been pretty decisive wins by 17 points or more in both cases for the Dogs. But there's always a little too much angst in this game. I think I was talking with somebody who covered Georgia for a long time, and he said, "Oh yeah, you got to really be careful with Florida." And I was like, "Yeah, man, that whole thing from a long time ago, that's not around anymore. Like that's not something that people are really, like legitimately, Georgia being the better team. I think that matters now, and I think Florida's in real trouble. This is going to be a hard game for Florida to win, and it's because Georgia can really run effectively. Florida's not spectacular at anything, um, which is a bit of a problem when you're trying to play a team that's so good in the Georgia Bulldogs. The other thing is, as well as Mertz's play lately, Graham Mertz, the quarterback at Florida, and he has played well, frankly. He has played significantly better than I think people are kind of giving him credit for. Particularly as I was saying lately, uh, I don't know if I don't know if he's the level of quarterback that can beat Georgia, but we're gonna see. I mean, the guy has not had a game where he's thrown. Well, he's had one game where he's thrown for lower than 70% as a passer, and that was against South Carolina when he went for 423 yards, three touchdowns. They do give up a lot of sacks. I will say that about Florida. 19 sacks and that's a lot. That's a lot of sacks. So you can't play like that against Georgia. Like you can't give up. They gave up 4 sacks against South Carolina, 3 to Vanderbilt, 3 to Kentucky, 3 to Charlotte, 5 to Utah. I mean, like that's not acceptable play. So Mertz is going to get the ball out quick. There's going to be a lot of side to side, but you're going to have to challenge Georgia down the field, and you're going to have to run the ball effectively, or it's going to just be a really long day. I think it's probably going to be a long day no matter what, but we'll see. And that's the line for now. It's about 16-ish points for Georgia over the Gators.